Hi guys, so for those of you that don't know, my name is Madison Allman, and today we're going to be combining my two loves in baking, cake and cookies. So today we're going to be doing a chocolate chip cookie cake, and it'll be 9 inches around, and I'm thinking about designing it after a birthday cake, similar to one that I did for my Aunt Rana, which you'll see. And then I have done a little more adventurous things, such as this Christmas tree cookie cake, such as and this tree, I did actually use a cake mold, which was a time saver, I'd say the least. But this chocolate chip cookie cake is based off of my mother's cookie recipe for the most part. And you're not getting her cookie recipe, unfortunately. It's a little family secret. But you're guaranteed to love this cookie cake. Now, cookies have been so important to my family because I bake them for every holiday, everybody loves them, and they just enjoy eating them. It helps us gather around and create memories and take a little gap from this real world, which can be awfully cruel at times. And it's fun to see whenever your little cousin, such as mine named Athena, who had chocolate all the way up her face at Christmas. It was quite a mess to clean up. Now, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'm definitely still learning, so leave your thought. Now for step number 1, you need to turn your oven on to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Now you need 10 tablespoons of butter, 1/3 cup of white sugar, 2/3 cup of brown sugar, 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Now I use the cheap stuff. 3/4 teaspoon of salt. You need one whole egg and one egg yolk. And then you need 1 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Now I'm using milk chocolate and white chocolate chips since I'm doing a half and half, but you're welcome to use whatever you want, and then you're good. Now we're beginning the baking process. First, you need to plug up your mixer. I'm using a hand mixer because my stand mixer is a little heavy to get down, and this is softened, not melted butter, and first step is you need to cream it. And it's easiest just to quickly whip it up with a hand mixer. Once you see a nice, smooth consistency, you know it's ready to go on to the next step. Now you have to add your 2/3 cup of brown sugar, and then you'll also add your 1/3 cup of white sugar. You can add both at the same time, and it's be careful when you start the mixer again, because if you go too fast, it will cause a puff. Like you see me almost making a mess there. I do that every time I bake. I make a massive mess. My mom calls me her mini tornado. And then as it gets to the consistency you want, you should start to see the butter incorporated with all the sugar, and it should be like a clumpy texture. And now it's time to add in your eggs. I find it easiest to crack an egg into the bowl separately so you don't have any shell in it. And then to separate the egg from the yolk, I usually use my hand as like a filter for it. I put my hand and let the whole egg catch, and then just keep passing it hand to hand until the yolk and the egg whites are separated. As you can see here, the egg white continues to run through your fingers. It can be a little messy. You just gotta be patient with it too. And we're ready to go finally. And then as you add your egg yolk to that, now it's time to add in your eggs to your mixture, because it just gets poured into. You don't have to worry about beating it, as it'll just get completely incorporated into the mix. And finally, we have reached the consistency we want. Not much butter left, and it's a really smooth texture. And you need to make sure to scrape that bowl so that way it's all nicely mixed and consistently through. I usually just use this little red spatula I have. It allows me to get into the nooks and crannies of things, and it's a little flexible so it goes with the curvature of the bowl. And we're finally done getting it off the mixer. Now you just need to make sure to scrape that bowl and make sure it's all down in the bottom and mix thoroughly. Now it's time to add in your vanilla. And I just use the cheap stuff because it tastes kind of the same to me, to be honest. And here I am being a little stupid because I had a full bottle and a quarter bottle and I forgot about it, so I had to go find it. And it says that you can use a teaspoon of vanilla, but if you want it to have more of a vanilla flavor, it doesn't hurt to put in a tad more. And now this really smooth, kind of sticky texture means that you're finally ready to start mixing your dry ingredients. First, you'll have your 1 and 2/3 cups of all-purpose flour, and then you'll add in 3/4 teaspoon of salt and baking soda. Not baking powder, baking soda. Now, to mix dry ingredients, I find it easiest to usually just use a small whisk. Now, here's a little note to self and a little tip for you. This bowl is really full, and if you want to mix it better so that way you don't get a big bite of baking soda, use a little bit of a bigger bowl so that way you don't make a mess like I did. I had powder everywhere. Now that the dry ingredients are completely mixed, it's time to mix it into your wet. So first, add about half of your dry mixture so that way it's easier to incorporate instead of just sitting there working a giant vat of flour at one time. This is taking a really long time. Hold up the music. I said stop. Okay, by the power of editing, we are done mixing. And you can see it's starting to be a really thick texture. And then now you would add your other half and get ready for more elbow grease because it takes a good bit. And then through the power of editing in 3, 2, 1, bam, we're done mixing. And all I can say is I deserve my Hogwarts letter after pulling magic like that. Now let's get this all mixed up, and you can see it's a really thick texture. And now it's time to add your candies, your chocolate chips, and I'm using milk chocolate first. And I usually add around a cup, maybe a little bit more. It's mostly just depending on how much you want. Some people like less chocolate, some people like more. I'm a kind of in between person, but I'm using both white and milk chocolate right now since that's kind of what my dad was wanting, so. And back to the tunes. Now our dough is finally finished. It's really thick. It feels just like cookie dough, even though it's for a cake. Now it's time to prep your pan. This is a 9-inch round cake pan, and usually how I prepare my pans to keep them from sticking is been used throughout years of my family. We just use a little bit of vegetable shortening. Then we just get a paper towel, we smear some onto it, and then we coat the pan, the bottoms and the sides, because if you don't do the sides as well, it will stick. Trust me, I have learned the hard way. And you don't need a ton, like you can see here, I just used enough to kind of just coat it. And then the little secret is not just putting grease, you also put flour. But the vegetable shortening is what allows the flour to stick, and that flour creates a buffer between your dough and your pan. And out of the sprays and everything that I've used in the past, this is the best trick I've seen that keeps stuff from sticking. And then you take your all-purpose flour and you just barely put enough to coat the bottom. As you can see here, I'm putting a little extra because a little extra doesn't hurt. And then you just tap it around. You just hold it at a around 90ish, maybe a little bit less angle, and you just keep vibrating the pan slightly, and it'll keep causing the flour to rotate. And then once you're ready to go to the side, just put your hand so that way the flour can rub against your hand instead of falling out of the pan. Then once your pan's completely coated, you can either turn it upside down into another cake pan if you're doing like a multiple layer cake, or you can do it into a plate or into the trash can. Just hit it hard onto something to where it makes a sound, and it'll allow the extra flour to not go onto your cake, but it has enough barrier to where your cake doesn't stick. Now here I was going to try a paper plate for the first time, but I was not quite as successful because it made a mess on my counter and kind of bumped the side of the pan. But it worked well enough for this cake since it didn't rise a whole bunch like a normal cake would. And back to your music after you put your batter into your pan. Now here's the fun part. Once all your batter is in your pan, I usually just use my hands and try to flatten it out as best as I can. I just try to spread it out since it's not as liquidy as normal cake batter, so it doesn't like spread out itself. You have to do it for it. And then you can see that you have a problem with the fingerprints, leaving little fingerprints all over it. So to help fix that, I usually just use some sort of one of my measuring scoops, and I just kind of smack it. And try to keep the sides of your cake as flat as possible, as level as you can with the rest, because if it has a little ridge against the side, it's more likely to get burnt along that ridge. And nobody really likes a super burnt cookie. And now your cake's ready to go into the oven. Now that the oven is preheated to 350 degrees, I usually put my cake on the bottom oven since it's convection oven, so that way the air is able to quickly go around the pan instead of going up close to the top where it tends to be a little bit longer. And that kind of causes it to burn sometimes around the outside when it's so cool. And it's going to do great. And she's finally done. Now you're able to tell that this cake is done once it turns golden brown and the center is slightly firm. Now it is crucial to remember that once this cake cools down, it does firm up on its own more. So if you keep letting it go after it's even slightly firm in the middle, it is very likely that you will have a cookie cake that is like a block of concrete. So you just need to make sure that now that it's slightly out of the oven, you can see that the top of it is a nice golden brown, and like I said, the center of it just needs to be slightly firm, so it just needs to have a little bit of give once you touch it. Now, don't touch it immediately out of the oven. If you need to, just use a fork or something, and you can feel a little bit of resistance. And it's ready to be cooled and then decorated, because if you decorate it while it's hot, your icing will turn into a puddle. Now, to help cool it quicker, I usually put it in the fridge, which is I did here, which is why I'm able to touch it. Now, to get it out of the pan successfully, I usually just use a butter knife, and then I just go around the edge of the pan, and this helps break up any parts of it that might be stuck to it. And then just put your hand all the way across the top of the cake as best as you can, and then just flip it upside down. And voila, it's successful. We have our cookie cake now. Now it is still slightly warm currently, so it's going to go back in the fridge before I decorate it. And now it's time to make the icing. Now you need 4 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, 1 1/4 cups of powdered sugar, half a teaspoon of vanilla, and 1 to 2 tablespoons of milk. It depends on how dry your icing looks. And then first you add your butter, just like you did with the cake mix, and then you cream it, just like any other icing. And of course, I took the mixer apart to clean it, so now I have to put it back together. I find stand mixers also work amazingly for this. It's just ours was put away and it's quite heavy to get out, so I just used our hand mixer for this and it works just as well. Now that the butter's all creamed, it's time to add in 1 1/4 cup of powdered sugar. Now, when you first mix this, it'll look really dry in your icing, but don't worry about it because you do add more liquid in the form of vanilla and milk. But my powdered sugar is starting to get a little on the older side, so it's important that that I sifted it. And I'm using a sifter that's actually really important to our family because it belonged to my dad's dad, my grandpa. And it's been used in baking for those generations. We've used it for anywhere from cakes, cookies, biscuits, funnel cakes. It's been used for a lot. Now that it's all sifted, I just have to clean up my mess, and it's time to add your powdered sugar into your butter. Now, when you first start your mixer with the powdered sugar, be extremely careful and start on the lowest speed you can, because powdered sugar is worse than normal sugar and it'll create the largest cloud ever. As you can see here, it's just very important to keep a clean workstation as you're going. That's why I keep stopping to wipe it down. Otherwise, you're going to have a very fun time cleaning at the end. Now back to your tunes. Now it's time for me to interrupt your music vibes to tell you it's time to add the vanilla. Now, with the vanilla, you add half a teaspoon of vanilla, but you can add a little bit more if you want. But I'm making chocolate icing, so I just wanted a little extra in the flavor, so I added enough to taste it, but not enough, a lot, I should say. And then now it is time for the milk. And I decided to add 2 tablespoons of milk since my icing was looking a little drier. And it's also because our family uses the 0% fat milk. It's usually better if you can get a higher percent fat because it adds more fat to your icing, and sometimes you have to use a little bit less of it. And now it's time to just mix, mix, mix. You can see here that the icing is essentially done at this point if I was doing vanilla icing. But I'm decided to do chocolate, so I'm using cocoa powder. And for the cocoa powder, you just use 2 tablespoons. And make sure that your measuring thing is dry because cocoa powder, if it's weird when it gets wet. And then you just add that into your mixture as well, and it's just like the powdered sugar. Start on the lowest mixer setting, otherwise you will cause a massive puff. And trust me, chocolate tastes good, but not when it feels like you're inhaling it. To start decorating, I usually use a disposable piping bag, and I'm using a star tip today. And to start your piping tip, all you need to do, if you're using a disposable bag, is figure out roughly how big the hole needs to be and just snip off the end. And sometimes you'll be right, sometimes you need to cut off a little bit more, but it's better to always measure first. And if you get it wrong, just cut again, but you can't ever put it back, and you don't want your piping tip popping off mid-job. Then to start your icing, you make it like a C shape with your hand, and then you just turn your icing bag inside, kind of inside out, with your hand holding on the bottom of it. And this allows you to have a nice little area to scoop your icing into. And now it's time to just take that delicious little chocolate icing and scoop it on in. And just keep going until the desired amount is in the bag. Also, in some cases, if you're wishing to use different colors, just split your icing into different bowls and then just have different bags with whatever tip you want on it. And then just use the same technique, and then you'll be able to load it just in time. And back to your music. Now here I'm sort of just moving the icing closer to the tip and twisting the top to make sure that I have enough pressure on the icing on the inside to make it come out the way I want it to. And I'm still learning how to pipe, so I'm very rough with it, but I decided to do a little, like, tower design of it, and I just continue to do a ring of them all the way around. And as you continue piping, just keep twisting down as you use more icing. It'll keep making sure you have more pressure. And as you pipe, squeeze and apply pressure with your top hand at the top of the bag. Then use your bottom hand as more of a stabilizer and as a guider to which way you want the bag to go. And here's a good teaching moment about what to do when you mess up. So I was originally going to write birthday full out, but I think I wouldn't have enough space. So I just grab a spatula, scrape off the area that I didn't want, and then I just decided to put B-Day instead, so that way I knew I had enough space to completely write out that word. And voila! Your labors have paid off. You have a delicious looking and tasting cookie cake. And this is enough to feed at least several people. So I hope you enjoy it. And that's how you make a cookie cake. It's just a few simple steps, and after a few times of practice, you'll be able to get it down. Now, I am definitely still learning, so please leave your thoughts and ideas in the comments down below. And I'm still very new to this, but one of my favorite bakers on YouTube, his channel is called Preppy Kitchen. I'll put a link to his channel down in the description below. And he has so many things. He's taught me how to make a few different types of cookies, such as chocolate crinkle cookies, lemon crinkle cookies, gingerbread without molasses. He's just a really good channel. You need to check him out. And special thanks to my mom for the cookie recipe. And I hope y'all like this video. Bye.